Hi, my name is Mark Thekathala, and I'm a solutions architect at PixieBrix. Today we're going to be looking at the Sticky Notes Sidebar, which is a tool that you can use to annotate any web page and collaborate with any of your teammates. And so what we'll do here is you'll notice that there are plenty of notes already on this page, and so I can go to another page, realize that there's no notes on this page, and we'll start our test here. And so just like that, we're going to record the user, the date, as well as the note, and you can collaborate with your other teammates whose notes will show up in your sidebar as well. And so today we're going to look at how you would actually go about building this. And so we'll open the page editor. And we're going to remove the sidebar we currently have so that we can build a new one. And so here we'll go to add. These are the different enhancements that you can use in PixieBrix, and so we'll choose a sidebar panel, and we'll just refresh the page so we have a clean slate, and we'll render the panel, and you'll notice that instantly you'll get some information on the sidebar which we can customize. And so on the render document brick is where you're going to create the look and feel of your sidebar. And so the first thing we're going to want to do is create a button like we saw previously for adding a note. So we can use very minimal code here to actually change the look and feel of the sidebar. And so we don't need any text, but we will need a list to actually show all of the elements. And so each note we're going to show will show up in a card like this, and since we don't have the actual list of notes yet, we're going to leave that blank. And so here we're going to start with getting the information that's already available in the database, and so we'll use the get data from a PixieBrix database to do this. And so in this setup, we will be choosing our database, but in the blueprint that you saw, this will be available in the pre-configuration settings. So we'll choose all notes. If we don't find the key, we'll choose blank. And here we're going to have a generic key such as notes. And so why are we doing this? The main structure of this blueprint that we're building will be to grab all of the notes stored in this notes key, sort and filter them out to what's applicable for this page, display the notes, and then the second functionality we will have is to actually add a note back into that notes object that we have that stores all our notes in the database. And so now that we have all of the notes in this note data, you'll see that these are for a couple different sites. So Wikipedia, other pages of formulated automation, Google Docs. And so what we're going to need to do is filter this down. And to filter, we'll use JQ. So this JQ brick, I'm actually going to copy and paste in the filter that I had created, which I'll walk through in a minute. And then we're going to need to pass it the information that we have. And so I'm actually going to name this current database and re-render the panel. So I'll copy the data, since that is something that will always come out of the database. And then I'll use this filter to get the notes that actually apply to the current page. And so how do we do this? So in this data, we're going to optionally look for this .note data. And so if we've made notes in the database before, we will show up with this note data object with all the notes. And so that's why that's one of the reasons we've surrounded this in a try. And so if we have the note data, we're going to open up that object, pull out the individual elements of the array, which would be the notes, and then filter only the notes that have the URL of the input URL. And what is the input URL? So that will come from the URL that the user is currently on. And so what this will do is only show notes for the page that the user is currently on. And we'll get that value and build in a key for this object. And so this is all in the try, but in the catch we will be handling scenarios where there are no notes for that page. Maybe there's invalid notes or deleted notes and other situations like that. And so we'll actually name this create list of notes for this, meaning the user is on this site. Perfect. And so now that we have our list of notes, we can sort them, and you'll notice that we end up only having one note for this site, the demo note that we just wrote. And so now what we're going to do is actually work on displaying these. And so we'll actually name this notes list, and we can use this array that we have at notes list to start to show the notes in the sidebar. And so we can call the individual elements of this notes list a note and render the sidebar. And you'll see that we got one card, which is for the one note. And now we'll customize the card, so we can do something like at note.user. And where do we get that from? So in the note, this first array item will be the note. We have .user for who wrote the note, and I'll just paste it in so that we're consistent. And so we know that this is handled by the list, so it's at note.user, and then maybe we'll give a timestamp as well at note.timestamp, which is also from our variable here. And so looking at the timestamp here, maybe we only want the date, so we can use a function called slice to cut that down, and we can test it by quickly rendering the panel. And you can see here's the user, here's the date, and all we need is the actual note now. So in the card we will say at note.note, and that's because at note is the individual element, .note is the actual value. So when we render this, you'll see that we now have this beautifully created card for each note. And so a couple small things we can do to make the look and feel of this nice is we can add a bootstrap class called button block, and this will extend the button to the whole width. And we can also begin to work on the add note functionality. And so when we added this note, you'll notice that we have this button pipeline name, so we could say note button, just so we know that in the pipeline this is the note button. And so the first thing we'll want to do is give the user some way to tell us what the note is, and so we can use this show a modal or sidebar form, which is very similar to the document builder, where we can say add a note, and we'll see a preview in the preview window. We could call the variable coming out note and the label note, and we have plenty of different types of inputs, but for this one we'll use paragraph text, and we will call this a required field. So when I render this, when I click the button now, we have a modal which allows the user to type a note. And so one other thing we can do is change the location to the sidebar. And so when we render this, when we click the note, we're going to render in the sidebar the exact same thing. And so we'll leave it in the sidebar now so it's not interrupting the actual web page. And we now have to take a couple different bits of information about the user, the timestamp, and the actual note, and package that into an object that we can put back in the database. And so the first thing we're going to need is their username. And so we can actually get the PixieBrix user profile reader, which doesn't take any objects, but will allow us to get the username. We want to also generate a timestamp for that note. So we have the note, the username, and the timestamp. And then what we'll do is actually run it so we can get some of the trace output. Great. And so what we're going to do here is use the username, use the timestamp that we have, and use the note that was typed to create an object to pass back into the database. And to do this, we'll again use the JQ object. And what we'll do here is paste in the filter that I have. And so what this is going to do is create a note object with the key, a unique key called URL, email, and timestamp, along with the data that we will be passing in. And so under data, this is all the information we have about our note. So we could say the URL, and we could take the @input.url of the current page. We could get the user, so we know it's the email of the profile reader. We could get the timestamp. We know that comes from @instant.timestamp. And we could also get the note. So this is going to come from the form that the user is going to fill out. And so just like that, we're going to build a unique key along with all the properties that we need. And we can call this generate a note object. And so now with this note object, we want to put it back into the database so that us along with our teammates can view the updated note. And so very similarly to our get, we're going to put it straight back into that notes key. We're going to select the database, and this is important here. So we're going to use the merge strategy deep append. So what does that do? That's going to allow us to place this object that we have back into the array that's already in the database instead of overwriting it. And so when I say note data and I pass in the note object from the previous step, instead of overwriting that note object that may already be there, we're going to append this object onto the array we already have. And so that looks like this. So we could say second demo. And you'll see that we have note data, which now has 13 keys, and the last one being our second demo. And so we didn't overwrite any of the notes, we just appended that. But one thing you'll notice is that it wasn't portrayed in the sidebar, and that's because we have not asked the sidebar to refresh itself. So what we'll do is give a very small wait, 250 milliseconds, 250 milliseconds, about a quarter of a second, and then we'll use just the show sidebar brick to refresh the panel. And so we will render and save this. And if everything worked correctly, I can close this, I can add a note, say final note, and it's going to pop up here.